ये क्या
Assalamu alaikum, Jahangir. How are you? Jahangir, can you hear me? Okay.
I can.
Okay, so we'll wait for another 3 minutes and then we'll be starting formally.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I think we should start. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you everyone for joining. I welcome all of you on behalf of atomcamp. I'm Naveed Iftihar. I'm co-founder of atomcamp. My colleague Fiza is also around. Both of us will be moderating this session. So it's a pleasure to have Dr. Jahangir with us. Dr. Jahangir will let you know about his career himself, but just briefly let you know, he's currently a principal engineer at a Silicon Valley-based startup, Ikigai. Before that, he has worked with Google, Microsoft, and some other big tech companies. Jahangir is also a CS lecturer at Stanford, and previously he has taught at MIT. He did his undergrad from Princeton University and PhD from MIT. So it's a pleasure to have Dr. Jangir with us. So Dr. Jangir, we really look forward to your session. So what we'll be doing, Dr. Jangir will be speaking for maybe like 30 minutes or so. After that, there will be question and answer session. I will request everyone that you can write questions in the chat box. When there is a time, we will request you to ask questions. अभी आप start में करेंगे तो वो ज़रा वो हो जाएंगे हमारे से overlook हो जाएंगे. तो what I'll request कि once his talk is over, you can note down your questions and write in chats, and then we'll pick up a few questions from the chat and we'll request Dr. Jagir to answer those questions. Thank you everyone again for joining us, and let's learn from Dr. Jangir. Over to you, Dr. Jangir.
All right. Can you hear me? Reads up?
Yes.
All good? Okay.
Yes.
Right. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As you heard, thank you, Naveed Saab, for the introduction. Very kind, very generous. I hope that I'll sort of keep this maybe to 25, 30 minutes, and then we can leave enough time for questions, because I think your questions are probably going to be more important than anything I have to say here. I just have a few slides to maybe crystallize my thoughts, what I am seeing, and then where I think I'm assuming everybody who's joining here has some interest in a more tech-focused, tech-leaning career, whether it's in the US or whether it's outside. That's why you see I've put the US in slightly less bright colors on the slide, because it doesn't really matter. Some of the advice here is going to go across the board, and towards the end, I have maybe a couple of slides on recommendations. If US was really a goal, what could people do? I do want to say thank you for joining. I really appreciate your time. Lekin I also want to forewarn you, okay, I don't think you will hear anything here today from me that you don't already know, that wouldn't already be obvious to you, which is why I am interested in your questions and see if I can address some specific things as well. So let's get started. Naveed Saab already did the introduction, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. This is just to make sure that if you wanted to know who I am, in terms of my jobs and education, this is who I am. Obviously, that's a very small part of any human's life, but I grew up in Rawalpindi, spent most of my life there. That is still home for me. And मैंने अपना undergrad in electrical and CS, I did it from Princeton. Now it feels like a really long time ago. And then I worked for a little bit, and then I joined the PhD program at it was a CS/operations research PhD program at MIT. I finished in 2018, and since then I was at Google for about nearly 6 years. And in between, during my PhD and around, there have been several sort of data scientist or consultant sort of roles. You can think whatever you want to call it. It doesn't really matter. And these days, very excitingly for me, I had the AI platform team at a startup called Ikigai Labs. The fun thing about the startup is it's basically been around for about 3 years or so. And it's my PhD advisor runs the startup. A few other people from my group have basically been involved in it. I think some of you are raising your hand. I've been told we'll do questions at the end, so I'm going to unfortunately move on. And so these are sort of minor details just to sort of give you an insight. What I really enjoy doing, though, is I really enjoy teaching. I've been very lucky that since I completed my PhD program at MIT, I also started there as a full-time CS lecturer. Then I continued doing that while I was at Google, and I mostly teach the machine learning class, which is a very large class at MIT. I'll be rejoining MIT, but now part of the professional education program. A bunch of obviously people like you who are mid-careers, late careers, executives who also want to know, generally how does AI impact their business, their decision making, and what should they really do. And so it's a re-education upskilling program for executives. I'll be joining that starting mid next year. And then right now I've spent about a couple of years, parts of the years, not completely, teaching the AI and ML classes at Stanford. Some of you who are interested in machine learning AI probably know of CS229. It's the famous sort of Andrew Ng course. That's the one I taught this past summer at Stanford, and it was a lot of fun. Good thing is, you don't need to be at Stanford to take all of the lectures, get all of the materials, all of the course materials and exercises and notes from the course, because they're all public. And so for those of you who know what this is, you already know where to find that information. So you don't have to be enrolled in Stanford and pay them a lot of money to benefit from it. So anyway, that's just a little bit about me. I want to skip ahead and essentially maybe recap. I think most of you will know this, which is, AI has been around a really long time. Some of you might have attended a couple of talks I've given with atomcamp in the last year. We talk about the history of AI and what is AI. The bottom line is, let's skip to the interesting part, which is AI is not new. What you're seeing with large language models and some of these things, ChatGPT and others have really made it cool again, or appear cool again. But this has been around for a very long time. We used to maybe not call it AI at times. Sometimes parts of it are machine learning. Parts of it have been things that you've learned otherwise. So any CS student here will recall Dijkstra's algorithm, right? We almost always sort of learn Dijkstra's algorithm. Today, if you ask somebody, they might think, oh, that's not AI, but that's exactly what AI has been and evolved from many, many sort of decades ago as well. So this is a long sort of history. We don't need to get into that. But the bottom line is that whatever AI means to you, it's here to stay. And so today I'll focus a lot more on what is happening today that we all collectively call AI, especially as it applies to engineering and particularly software engineering jobs and expectations of those jobs. So what's cool again, we don't need to go into the details, but I do want to highlight a couple of things. Of course, this is now a more maturing field, which is why AI is sort of making a big impact. As happens with all fields, you can't expect new young fields to have as great an impact as AI is having right now if it was a relatively new thing. And I do want to highlight the fact that some of these changes are because of what I call democratization of knowledge, the internet, open source, and all those things. And really, I highlighted it is because what we are doing here right now is part of the democratization of knowledge, right? Everybody these days, let's not say everybody, but most people these days have access to both knowledge, material, people, and there's an exchange of ideas that is possible today. While you may be sitting anywhere in the world, I may be sitting somewhere else in the world, but we can essentially communicate. This is 8 a.m. for me here. I'm based in California. It's 9 p.m. for you in Pakistan, and hopefully you can hear me clearly, you can see me clearly, and hopefully you can understand, and I'll learn from you from some of your questions. When I was growing up, this is not that long ago, none of that was really possible as well, right? So the internet has really been a game changer for a lot of things, which is why some of the things, when knowledge is easily available to everybody, then it means that the progress is also more rapid. And I'll come back to it later as well when we talk about sort of what you can do and tools available at your disposal to prepare yourself. And then, of course, computing resources has been a big game changer. Obviously, as technology has advanced in the hardware side of things, you have GPUs and TPUs now. Cloud computing, which everybody thinks everything is on the cloud, but it's not quite. There are still organizations and countries moving towards accepting the cloud, of course. And so there is a big movement happening in parallel and has been happening for the past maybe 15 years or so around cloud computing. And that a lot of that is at the center of why you're seeing the advancements in AI, because yes, some of the models, some of the things, some of the advancements you and I can run on our laptops today. But still, if you really want to do foundational research, create new models from scratch, you are going to need a lot of compute resources, and none of them are available to any of us on our laptops, right? So you need that infrastructure. And then finally, of course, deep investments. There's a lot of money available for both research, for both in research in the academia, so universities, and also in private research labs, and also within the industry. The other part of this is deep investments mean generally what is the most costly investment. Yes, there is TPUs and GPUs and hardware, but the most costly investment that anyone makes these days in a business is actually on people. So there are budgets and there are resources available to essentially hire more people, right? And that is where obviously there is good news, I think, for all of us involved in this domain, because obviously there is no saturation of the demand versus supply. I think there is still a big gap between the people needed and the people who are available, and of course this will change over the next maybe 10 years. But if you are into the computer science field today, I think you are still doing the right thing and setting yourself up for success in the future. And so we can discuss that in a second as well. All right, so this is great. Some things have changed. AI is cool again. It's impacting a lot of things, not just engineering and engineering related things. You all know this. But I want to sort of distill down things that I believe I've seen, not just read about, but also seen in my experience on how it's impacting the expectations of software engineering jobs. And so I'll focus on software engineering, not sort of other domains right now. So here's a small list. Some of it, this is not a complete list, but this is based off of my understanding, some of the things I've seen. So some things are changing. For instance, there are newer tools available to all of us. Co-pilots, a lot of you know about this. They're everywhere. GitHub has co-pilots, and XYZ has co-pilots, and these are assistants that help you get your job done faster, perhaps in some cases better. And then there's also this world of prompt engineering. If you ask me, I'm sorry, I'll say I don't think there's any engineering in prompt engineering. It's okay. It's just how to use a tool. How do you describe your inputs so you can get the right outputs? So this is not nothing new. So why do I say that there's nothing new? So maybe I'll complete the list first. So there's better auto completion available for tools in the tools that we use to code, for instance. There is quicker debugging, and that certainly has changed, which is you get answers to where you might have stalled in your debugging process. That certainly is available faster, more efficient. Previously, we had to go to like Stack Overflow and really try to figure out if we find the right thing or ask somebody. Generally, the turnaround time for that has certainly shortened, which and that also has led to increased automation. You've probably, some of you might have heard, this was a headline recently. Google CEO on the earnings call, I think 2 weeks ago or something, said that about 25% of the code that's written in Google is now through automation. Now, what does that actually mean? I don't think it's as big a deal as people are making it out to be. Does that mean that 25% of the code that everybody writes is now currently written by some automation, some AI agent? That's not true. What he meant was there is some auto completion. It's very good. And so sometimes you don't have to type a button because the auto completion is very good. It guesses what you're trying to do. All right. So that's one part. The other part is that there are a lot of testing and other frameworks that are available when you are trying to deploy your code in production and things like that. A lot of those things were previously also fairly automated, but they were automated by just having some static rules. Now those rules have become better. And so some of that code that you don't want to write, because it's very error prone if humans write it, some of that stuff is being produced automatically. And so it's not that big a deal. Interviews, which I think is relevant for a lot of you, what has changed is people who are interviewing, say somebody like me interviewing somebody like you, what has changed is a lot of candidates are very obviously trying to cheat their way through interviews because they have some audio AI agent open on the other end, sort of solving the problem for them. What I want to tell you is that I have yet, I have the impact I've seen is that we have rejected a lot of candidates where even though we can't see and be sure that they are essentially doing something they're not supposed to, it's very obvious from their answers that they are not producing the answer using their own mind. They're essentially trying to cheat their way through. What I want to sort of tell you also is that you are probably any serious job that you're going to want to get, if you are caught in any part of the process doing that, you're not going to get the job, and it will hurt the rest of your career. And don't do it because you're found out very quickly. I also want you to do this exercise, which is think about what happens if you fool somebody and actually manage to get in. Imagine that you successfully passed interview questions and got a job offer from your favorite company because you did it all through agents. It wasn't you. What happens on day one? How are you going to essentially, is your goal to only get the job, or is your goal to actually stay in the job and advance your career? I would argue that if the goal was just to get the job, it's completely useless. You're wasting your time more than anyone else's time. Companies can find a lot of other people, and companies will not wait for you. Just because you passed the interviews doesn't mean that you're going to stay there forever. So I would say, I know this may seem like empty advice, but we have rejected a lot of candidates who we know clearly don't seem to be answering questions themselves. So don't do that. And so what hasn't changed though, and I think this is more important, the quality bar for code hasn't changed. If anything, it has become more clear, because the quality of code produced by a lot of these auto completion tools is not always of the highest standard. And different industries, different parts of the companies, different companies have different standards of how the code should be structured and written. And just being able to write code that solves things. I love that about Google, where it wasn't about writing the most complex code to solve your problem. It was about how will somebody else be able to understand how you have written your code. That was more important than getting it correct. So sometimes we would actually do things in a what you might think is a more inefficient way. Some of you, I think all of you probably are familiar with Python. Some of the Pythonic constructs mean that you can write a single line of code, a really long single line of code, to do 5 things at the same time. At Google, we would completely ban that. That code would not be approved to go into production. Is because imagine being the person who is on the other end now reading this code, maybe reading it 6 months later. How are you going to, you're going to spend a lot of your time trying to make sense out of it. And it is very error prone to do things like that. So the software practice we used to adopt was essentially split that down into 5 lines of code. It's okay to appear to be inefficient if it's more readable. It wasn't inefficient in terms of how it executes. It's inefficient only in that it wastes 5 lines of code instead of 1 very complex line of code. So we would value simplicity. That's something that a lot of these tools don't typically do a very good job of, because this is not what they're designed to do. Of course, engineering design and decision making, it has become even more important, because if yes, automation can produce a little bit of code here and there, what are you doing? Your role, and it has always been the case, in the places that you dream of as a software engineer, the focus is not on how good quality code you can write. Number one, are you solving real problems? So problem solving is very high. Are you actually helping make better decisions? Are you just writing code for the sake of writing code? That's not of use to anybody. And also, what is the design principles around it? And I understand that some of you might think you can type in ChatGPT, give me a design for a Netflix and blah, blah. That's not what I'm talking about. You want to solve real problems. You have real constraints. Whatever ChatGPT is going to produce, you can't just automatically call that a tech design and follow that, because that's where your judgment comes into play. And if you haven't educated yourself to the point that you can sort of come up with design, your career is not going to go very far. And also, let me be very clear. As an engineer, as you go higher up in your career and mature, writing code is just a entry level sort of a thing. It always has been. What you do with the code, how you design the code, how you decide when is the time to start writing the code, That is a more mature sort of a field, and that's more important. And so all of you should hopefully keep that in mind. If you want to grow in that career, you want to go towards the design, you want to be the person who helps solve the problems. You don't want to necessarily remain as somebody who's just sort of writing code. And of course, interview expectations have evolved as well, because we know candidates are usually just looking for answers through AI tools. We are asking questions and probing deeper to see if you really understand. I care less about whether you have now solved a problem in 30 minutes or 13 minutes. I care more about, let's go through what you have solved. Could you solve it in a different way? What are the trade-offs? Why did you want to do it in the style that you ended up doing versus another style? I want to know if you can think about those things. That's the kind of stuff that is harder for AI agents to sort of help you with, because I want to get into understanding how you think, not how an agent thinks, right? And so those are sort of high level, what I have seen, at least I have been observing in the past couple of years. But the more important sort of set of questions is, what can you do in this environment of evolving expectations? And actually, let me go back. One thing I want to say, this is at the top, about new tools. I told you I'll come back to it. And this is where I want to share a slightly more personal view. I'm older than many of you, I think. And so I can certainly say, when I started my first internship, I think it was 2008. I go to this company, Goldman Sachs. It's a finance company. And I was an engineer, software engineer there. I go there and my mind was completely blown, because in school, I had learned algorithms and programming and whatnot. And how were we debugging in school? We were doing print statements, and I still do that. Print out the output, go through one by one to debug your code. And then I go there and I see people are doing that, but people are also using, smarter IDEs, that help them nowadays. Visual Studio has a lot of plugins. You now have co-pilots, obviously, and those sorts of things that help you. My mind was blown, because you could suddenly run through code, and you could go in debug mode, and you can pause the code execution at a particular point in time and really dynamically see what every variable's value is, what is the sort of registers where all of this information is stored on the machine. Can I go change things? It was really amazing for me to experience that. Oh, wow, this is how a lot of people are now sort of coding. But it's not that they were coding in that way. This was just, some of the tools that are now continuously have been getting better and better and better. And so newer generation of students are getting aware of those as they step out into the industry. If you think that your school or your, whatever, if you're taking boot camps, if you're taking upskilling courses and programs, it's not their job, in my view, to teach you how to use tools. Yes, those should be part of the workflow. But what they really need to teach you, and they should teach you, is how do you solve the problem, and how do you then integrate these tools into your regular workflow. I still work with people who are older than me, who still use Emacs only. And some of you might not even be born when people sort of talked about Emacs, right? Because it's an IDE, it's just a text-based IDE. They don't use any of these co-pilots and other tools. But then there is a generation of people who use a lot of these advanced IDEs. There's a generation of people who are now using co-pilots. I don't want you to think that there is anything special about this. This is just the evolution of tools for software engineering jobs. That has always been the case. And so embrace the tools, but don't use them to replace your mind. Eventually, it's your brain, it's your understanding that is important. The tools are only there to assist you, not to sort of replace you. And if you expect the tools to replace you, or if you think that the tools have replaced you, that's not neither true, nor is it going to help. And so now let's get to what you can do. Practically, what it means for students and practitioners, first thing is learning over. You've heard a lot of very famous people talk about, oh, nobody needs to learn how to code, and AI will be your next doctor and things like that. I want you to do this exercise and think, if you knew your doctor was an AI agent today, maybe 5 years from now, would you go to that doctor? Or even if the AI agent or that doctor tells you whatever the issue was, would you not ask a human doctor to confirm even, or deny, or tell you? I think I wouldn't. I'm sure some of you wouldn't either. If an AI agent tells you, unfortunately, you have cancer, are you going to stop right there? Are you going to believe, yes, my life is over, I have cancer because the AI doctor told me so? No, that's not true. So why should it be true for software engineering? The value of a good engineer remains where it is. If anything, it has become even better, because your expectation now is that you should be able to also discern between, use the tools to make you more productive. But nobody is, I haven't seen an actual software engineer's job replaced because somehow the tools can replace you. That's not the case, and I don't think that's where we are going. So learning is not over. And then I want you to think about this in terms of other things that have happened in human history before. Think about the internet, think about the industrial revolution and the printing press. Go back, read a history book, and you'll see all of those things. There were people, very famous people at that time, saying, internet is here, we'll all be out of jobs. Everybody will be sitting at home and enjoying life because the internet will do everything. Is that true? That's not true. Industrial revolution, printing press, a lot of very famous people said, this is the end of learning. Because now we can print things and everything will just be okay. We'll just print our way out into a society that knows everything. Is that really true? Printing press was invented a really, really long time ago. Certainly did not actually limit knowledge. If anything, helped make knowledge even more prevalent everywhere. And so there's nothing to expect that AI is going to sort of do the same thing. And of course, as I said before, what you can do is, if you want to really be valuable in today, maybe 10 years from now, that's what you want to maybe think, not what's happening today, but what will happen 10 years from now in our field. Then you want to start thinking about the design, and maybe with more emphasis than execution. Code is execution. Design is thinking about how things come together. You want to essentially, that's where human creativity takes over, even in technology. You don't want to let go of that, and you want to get really, really, really good at it. But can you get good at design without knowing anything about execution? That's not possible either, right? You need to be really good at the execution, and you need to use that and learn from your school, college, boot camps, upskilling programs. You should take what you want to take out of from the execution part, learning how to code, for instance, and learning how to code really well, really understanding what the code is doing, so that you can have any hope of being very good at designing things. And that's really important. And then, of course, there is no replacement even today. Uh, if you know a concept really, really well, there is no replacement for that. You will still always be very, very valuable. The problem is that a lot of us become generalists. We think we can do 50 things or 50,000 things, and we don't do any of them really well. That's okay. We'll all still have jobs. But the people who are most valuable in today's environment, and that has been true 50 years ago, that has been true 500 years ago, and that will be true 50 years and 500 years from now, which is people who really, truly, truly understand something in depth. They are always going to be, no tools are going to replace them, right? Eventually we write the tools. You still need people who will write those tools. Who are those people? Who know the domain really, really well, right? So you have to go deep into things. Now, I'm not saying everybody should do that. For most of us, knowing a lot of things 80% of the way is good enough. But if you really want to be irreplaceable, then you want to pick up a few things that you are really, really good at. And of course, what not to do, don't copy without understanding. I know it may seem like it's a shortcut, but really, it gets found out very quickly. And you will see in the next couple of years, this thing about copying and getting away, job applications, just submitting 5,000 of them because you can just copy paste things and get AI to do things, do interviews for you. This is going to start getting found out very quickly. And so don't waste your time trying to learn how to copy better. Try to learn how to think better would be the way to say this. And of course, I'll start winding down here. One thing, and this is me maybe philosophizing a little bit, what is not in your control is the set of opportunities you're going to get, whether you are in Pakistan, whether you're in the US, whether you are in any other part of the world. But what is in your control is the readiness that you can have for it. When an opportunity comes to you and you were not ready for it, it's too late already, right? Can you guarantee that an opportunity will come to you? No. A lot of the opportunities that have fallen in my lap today, I still can't tell you why they fell in my lap. The wrong answer is I was a hardworking person and I prepared really hard for it, and so I deserve all the opportunities. That's not true. All of them happened randomly by chance. And The only thing I did maybe was, for some of them I was ready. Of course, there were a lot of things I was not ready for them. And so the readiness part is what is in your control. The opportunities are not in your control, but you should focus on being ready so you can be ready for the opportunity, right? So what is the for engineering and software engineering, what are the sort of key things these days? You have to still learn how to write code and get really good at it. There is no replacement for it. If anyone's telling you otherwise, they are, you can take my word for it. I teach and I see and I interview and we build teams. Nobody has yet said, let's hire fewer software engineers. Everybody has said, let's start hiring people who actually know what they do, because there is some part of the job we can automate, but that doesn't mean we are hiring fewer people, right? So really learn how to do that well. Machine learning, statistics, mathematics, not everybody is going to be great at it, but some people who do develop an interest in it, please, by all means, spend time learning, not just libraries, but what's going on behind the scenes as well. Of course, data science, whether you want to call it data science, data analysis, whatever, it doesn't matter what name you give these things. The tools, the concepts are going to be the important thing. It hasn't changed. If anything, the expectations have increased, and because the knowledge is all at everybody's disposal, right? 10 years ago, there was no such thing as a boot camp that now you have access through, say, atomcamp or some of the others, right? It was a very niche sort of a thing. If somebody knew, a set of opportunities, then they would benefit from it. Now, the opportunities are a lot more democratic and it's available to a large number of people. And so certainly take advantage of those things. And remember, problem solving is the key. At Google, when we were interview people, we didn't call them coding interviews. We called them problem solving interviews, because eventually we are solving problems. If you're solving a problem that nobody needs a solution to, you're solving the wrong problem, right? You want to get better at problem solving. And does that mean you have to learn how to code to solve the problem? No. Does that mean you have to know how to sort of think in a particular way? No. Life will throw a lot of problems at you, which will have nothing to do with coding or nothing to do with engineering. But if you train yourself up with some of these skills, it will give you a way to sort of think about it. I often say, my PhD, the work I was doing there doesn't impact more than maybe say 100 people in the world. It's a very niche sort of a field, doesn't really matter. What it taught me, though, why I would 100% do it again for me, is problem solving. It's problem solving in a way where you're faced with a problem that you have never heard before. You have no idea how to go about it. And then you spend time thinking about it, breaking it down into small components, how to solve them. That has helped my life a lot. Forget about my career, that has helped my life a lot. And that is something that education and these things are meant to do. They're meant to make you better problem solvers. And so definitely learn how to use the tools. Hopefully the tools will make you more proficient and better, but don't let them replace your thinking, because that is never going to be the case. And it wasn't true ever in human history, and it's not going to be true going forwards. I will sort of skip this a little bit. You've heard a lot of these already. If you're a student, focus on programming. The chat GPT effect is great. Use it to your advantage. Don't use it to replace you. You're not going to stand out if all you know is how to write a prompt and get your answer. Definitely focus on project-based learning. So every time you learn a skill, even if the program doesn't ask you for it, see how you can apply it to a project. Definitely try to develop a mastery of some skill, whatever that skill is. Try to see, and usually let your heart guide you. If there is things that you're interested in, usually those are the things that you have a best chance of becoming a master in. And so don't be afraid if it's not related directly to what you're studying right now, but definitely try to master something you're interested in. I would always hire somebody who is interested in something because this is how their life has evolved, over somebody who's sort of trying too hard to sort of master something that they're just not interested in. Upskill for sure. Constantly, life is about upskilling. So you've done school, you've done a master's program, okay, but there are boot camps, there are other things. You like me, you graduated a long time ago, and so maybe there are new things around that I need to sort of learn and relearn. There was a Gen AI, sort of how to build a application course. I think some of you might have gotten this through Google, which was a 5-day sort of a thing. I did that last week too. I know all of that stuff. I was part of making some of that stuff, but it was still important for me to sort of relearn and sort of is figure out how people are doing this the new way. So there's no replacement for that. And then solve problems, right? And I will advise you that when you finish a software engineering or a computer science course, or a few of them, try to go think about problems around you. We all have problems around us. Some of you have, family members who run a small business. Could you help automate things there with code? There is all sorts of fraud going on, which unfortunately people get fooled by a lot. You can help with a lot of that by writing sort of like very basic sort of engineering can help you improve those things. Don't look for grand opportunities. Look for the little opportunities, because they will teach you how to apply what you have learned into practical context. And that is the core skill. That is what makes you experienced. And that is what's going to make you invaluable wherever you are. I'll skip this because if you're an entrepreneur, obviously you have to do a lot more. You have to be a jack of all trades. You have to know about technology. You have to know about economics and business and sales and go to market and all those sorts of things. But none of those things alone will make your business thrive. And embrace all the tools, but have a clarity of thought. Always know what problem you're trying to solve and focus on that, and then everything else will follow. And then finally, last slide, I think this is the most difficult part. I did want to mention, some of you saw the US in this, which is why you're here. Look, I'll be honest. Getting to the US as a skilled person from Pakistan is not the easiest from anywhere in the world. It's probably one of the harder things still. There are lots of reasons for it that I can't control, you can't control. But if you really wanted to, what my advice is, you can either get really fortunate, like I was in some ways, but then fortune is very hard to repeat and replicate, right? You have to be ready for the opportunities, but don't assume that there is only one way and only one point in your life where this needs to happen. If going into the US because you're into technology and there are some leading technology companies based in the US, that's a really good goal. But do you have to get there today? It would be great. Would it be any worse if you got there 2 years from now or even 20 years from now? It's when life opens that opportunity. So here are some examples of how I've seen people do this. One is the education route, of course, which is, if you are lucky, either you have a lot of funding, you do a bachelor's and undergrad there. Very rarely does that happen, right? I can't tell you how to do this because it depends on so many factors which are out of your control. But graduate studies, if you're interested, remember, graduate studies are not going to happen if you're not a student who is doing amazing in school, right? So there's no replacement for that. Not everybody can do that, but those who can, there are lots of opportunities there. That's a natural way, because then you sort of learn here and then you can sort of integrate yourself in the job market here. It's the same thing. I did my graduate studies in the US. If everybody from Pakistan tells me, you come back here, you think you'll adjust to the work environment here very quickly, even though I'm from Pakistan, I think the answer is obviously not. I'll need time. And so this education route gives you a little bit of time. Of course, there's the entrepreneurial route. You have great ideas. Maybe you are an entrepreneurial minded person. You have an idea for a company. Of course, the US is a big sort of, they've always been great at encouraging entrepreneurship. Think, if you've never heard of Y Combinator, you should check them out. You can submit ideas to them even from Pakistan these days. There's no restriction. Not hardly anyone gets accepted to it, so let's be realistic. But if you have an amazing idea, you have a good shot of things there too. Of course, look within your extended network. You all know how to use LinkedIn. This is probably how you found out about this particular webinar. But don't be shy from looking into your extended network. Usually there are opportunities here and there. People are looking for co-founders. People are looking for technical sort of expertise to start doing business with. It's harder, but this is for a certain type of person who is more entrepreneurial and doesn't mind uncertainty, and sort of this is not a very sort of linear path, right? This is harder. Of course, the other options are, if you have a US-based employer, for instance, who's operating out of Pakistan, then the easiest thing to do is to then focus your attention there and hopefully try to sort of get an employment started from there. Please mute yourself because I'm hearing myself. You? Okay, good. Thank you. And then finally, if this is important because a lot of companies do L1 visas in the US, which are a lot easier. There's no cap on that. A lot of Indians actually come here because they work for companies based out in US companies or foreign companies that have offices in India. Some of them have in Pakistan, and this will only increase with time. The brightest candidates, they tend to sort of like, allow them opportunities to move globally. That's an easy way as well. But again, not everybody will find themselves in that option. If that option is a realistic one for you, you should certainly, look to apply and prepare yourself for it. And then finally, big tech, right? Big tech recruits from all over the world. And these days, over the past 2 years, hiring has been very slow. Uh, I think you all know this. It's not always going to be like this. The 10 years before that, hiring was on an absolutely crazy spree. So things will improve in the next couple of years as well. You submit your resume, you try to find people in your extended network who can maybe get you a referral there. Remember, you might submit 100 of those, you might get rejections, automated rejections for 100 of those.
Why?
Oh man, okay. I was somehow I was muted. I don't know how much you missed. Where did you miss me?
Just the last part, I
This
think.
last part. Okay, I was just saying that don't be deterred by automated rejections from big tech or others. You should just practice, practice, practice. Lead Code is a good example. There are other coding sort of platforms as well. Prepare, prepare, prepare. I do that too. I'll give you an example, and I'll end after this. When I applied to Google, this is what I was saying as I got on mute. I was a PhD student finishing up at MIT in computer science. In my mind, at least Google would want a recruiter to talk to me. I submitted my resume and I got rejected within 1 hour, automated rejection in my inbox. It was the same job that they eventually hired me for too. But I got many of those rejections from all the big names because the process is not perfect. And you never know what's going on behind the scenes. Don't be dejected by it. But when I did get an interview at Google, and I want to remind you, I was a PhD student in CS. You know what I used to prepare for the interviews once I got the interview was my undergrad classes. Now all the videos are on YouTube. I went through my undergrad algorithms class to prepare for the problem solving that's required in those interviews. As a PhD student in CS, it takes, there's no, you shouldn't have so much pride that you think that is beneath me, right? You will always need to prepare for interviews wherever you are. Don't be shy from it. And my recommendation is try to solve a problem, interview problem. There are so many resources. Try to solve one every day. Hopefully, when the opportunity comes for you, at least not being prepared is not your problem, right? The rest is obviously up to God. And, I hope that everybody finds whatever they're looking for, but don't lose patience. You keep preparing, things will follow from there. I think this was my last slide. Yep. And then, sorry, last slide. Again, the same thing. There is no replacement for being really, really good at what you do. That is the sure shot way to make it wherever you want to make it in the world. Whatever that is, if you become really good at it, you won't have a problem. You might have to wait a little, you won't have a problem getting noticed. For the rest of us, like me, like you, most of you, we just need to be prepared. And then things will hopefully go from there. Don't be deterred. All right. I'm happy I went about 10 minutes over. I'm happy to stay 5-10 minutes longer. If there are any questions, let me know. And I don't think you should unmute yourself and ask your questions. I let Naveed Saab or Fiza, whoever it is, to sort of help with this.
Thank you, Jahangir. So I'll request everyone to write your questions in the chat box. तो आप unmute नहीं करें and write questions, and I'll pick up those questions. I'll share with Jahangir. Jahangir, I think the two things that you mentioned, those are really important. The one, that route to go to the US. I think graduate education is a great route. If you can get a scholarship or you can afford, if your dad has a corner plot, you can sell it. That will be the best investment you'll be doing. So if your dad has saved for your wedding, or if has saved for something else, so that's the best investment you can get. अदरवाइज जो है वो scholarships हैं. Atom Camp organizes so many sessions on graduate admissions abroad, Fulbright scholarships. We guide students. So again, I would say that this is also a serious business. I always tell students, decide today for a graduate education, particularly if you have an undergrad from Pakistan. Consider that you'll have to continuously work for 2 years or so that you can develop your application, you can look into universities, you can see what you want to do. And the second area that Jahangir also mentioned, we emphasize a lot, that is actually freelancing at Upwork. So we have seen so many people from Pakistan, they've been working on Upwork and finally they got an offer from the companies they were working with. So the one reason that you got to know connections, referrals, and that is very important. Even in our boot camps, we emphasize a lot. हमारा जो बूट कैंप होता है उसमें जो ग्लोबली टॉप 1% फ्रीलांसर है किब्रिया, ही ट्रेन्स स्टूडेंट्स इन फ्रीलांसिंग, और उसमें टॉप रेटेड एक्सपर्ट वेटेड फ्रीलांसर होता है. ही ट्राइज टू एक्सप्लेन ट्रेड ट्रिक्स फॉर अपवर्क, और उसमें आइडिया ये भी होता है कि यू कैन लर्न प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग एक्चुअली, बिकॉज सो मेनी पीपल कम ऑन अपवर्क and they throw their problems. Can someone solve it? So this is the best thing that one can think of. So let me just see some of the questions. First semester student.com said, please, as an entrepreneur, what tools or strategies do you implement for best practices? Jahangir?
As an entrepreneur, I don't know. I'm not an entrepreneur, and I have always not been an entrepreneurial-minded person. But Naveed Saab might be even better at answering this because he's a far more experienced entrepreneur than me. But I will just leave it with, and this is not going to be a satisfying answer, but remember, entrepreneurs are supposed to solve real problems. Whether you're solving it with code or with engineering or with something else, that is besides the point. Be very clear about the problem you're solving. What I see a lot happening in the Silicon Valley, elsewhere, everywhere in the world is people see certain technologies, chat tools now, AI, code completion, this, that, whatever. And then you say, I want to make a company or an idea around that technology. That's the wrong way to think about entrepreneurship. The entrepreneurship is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Is there going to be, I saw this example, you might have seen this with many other people, it's happening a lot as well, is people made a free tool available, saw a lot of people, engaged with their tool, decided I'm going to leave my job because I see hundreds of thousands of people finding my tool useful. Okay, quit their job, thinking now they can start making money off of it by making it I'll offer this service for a little bit of money. Literally nobody signed up for it because it wasn't actually a useful thing. It wasn't helping people solve problems. And then they went from a decent job to literally zero, right? And they realized that this is not what they want. And so want to solve a real problem and then decide what tools. And maybe AI and some of the tools are not even relevant to what you want to do. Don't forget that society's problems have nothing to do with whether AI is there or not. They will still exist. We need to sort of find the right tools to solve whatever problem that we are thinking of. That's my number one and only advice. I think don't let the hype drive what you want to do.
Yeah, thank you, Jahangir. Jahangir, there are so many actually questions. They are relating to the skill set again and again. And some of these questions are, they are university students, or they've entered into university in electrical engineering or CS or data science. And this is the one question that they are asking, what kind of skills they need to learn. And then there is also this question, which type of lead code questions should be solved for data science-based technical interviews. So I think everything is coming to,
Yeah, I'll make this. I'm going to look. I teach as well, and so you might not like my answer. What is stopping you from doing all of those lead code questions? Sure, some of them are behind like a premium subscription. Why do you? What if I tell you only solve the easy ones, and then in an interview get the medium difficulty one? Are you going to then blame me, or are you going to blame yourself? What's preventing you? And the way I would do it, so here is an engineer, the way I think about this is, time, you don't have time, I don't have time, right? I can't maybe solve all of the problems. Should I only solve the hard ones? Should I only solve, if I'm interviewing for a data analyst role, should I only solve the ones that have something to do with data? No. Focus on what you need. And if you're in a data science role, there are going to be data science related sort of problems. Try to solve more of those, but definitely solve the other software engineering questions too, because is somebody who is looking for a data scientist, will they say no to you because you are an excellent programmer as well? No, they will actually love that even more, right? So don't focus on only one thing. If you are interviewing for a coding interview, should you only solve hard lead code questions? No, you should maybe focus on the mediums, sample a couple from the easy, sample a couple from the hard, and essentially go from there. Don't commit to only one thing, because that is, so I'll say one thing, which is, if you're doing that, if you're looking for a shortcut that somebody's going to tell you just focus on this, then you're not acting like an engineer. This is not how engineers solve problems, right? So think like an engineer. If you had 5 things to focus, but you only have time to do some of them, well, how would you spread your energy across all of them? Try to sort of build it like that. In terms of the tools, I think the least important tools are the AI tools. Nobody interviews these days and says, do you know how to use a Copilot? Nobody uses an interview and says, do you know how to write a prompt in ChatGPT? This is something anyone can learn, and you'll get better and better at it. But what do people look for? Algorithms. In computer science and coding, algorithms is still the king. How do things work? How do you solve the problem? Number one and only thing that really matters. After that, programming, people ask me programming languages. Look, I didn't know C++ until I got to Google, and then I wrote production code in C++. There was a learning curve. I had to spend about 2-3 weeks trying to sort of see how things work. But why only 2-3 weeks is because pick up one programming language, even if it is Python, or it is Java, whatever it is, or it is C++, learn it really well, because the programming skill set and the problem solving doesn't change. What changes is the syntax, and the syntax is the easiest thing to learn. Yes, the first 2 weeks are new. You almost don't know how you need to do the basic things, but once you learn that, you don't forget it. That's the easy part. So learn one thing and maybe learn it really well. Now, also, I want to tell you, this is a very US centric perspective. In Pakistan, there are lots of people who've talked to me in Pakistan, and I won't name the employers, some really large employers who were talking to me, oh, we would love for you to work with us. I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do? And they're like, oh, first, do you know this framework and this framework and this framework and this framework and these 50 frameworks? And I said, I know 0 of them. And they're like, oh, then we can't really do this. You are not a fit for this. Yes, in Pakistan, there is a little bit of a, and so I'm not going to tell you to not care about those things. If you're going to be in the Pakistani environment, you will have to learn some of those things. Try to find out from people who work there what are some of the important frameworks. But my view is that the frameworks are not important. The language, environment, and some of those things are not important, because you can easily switch and learn. Those take 2 weeks, right? But what takes years to learn is what are the core concepts behind some of these things, right? How do you become a programmer? Object-oriented programming is not something that's unique to a particular language or not. Now, if you're writing Python code, let me just be very clear here. If you're writing Python code, you can write Python code in a script-like manner which has no understanding of object-oriented constructs. Then you don't really know how to program, right? That would be what I would say. You can pass some interviews where you're going to invariably come short in a lot of other things. So learn the concept, learn a language if you have to, or a framework really well. Like I said, there's no replacement for knowing things really well. But don't get bogged down by that. I would rather you go deeper into a small set of things than to go not deep at all in a large number of things. This is my perspective. Don't take this to be your gospel. Different things work for different people. As a data analyst, I'll finish this because I know some people are asking about data science and data analysts. Look, I never learned SQL, but I had to teach myself SQL while on the job, because SQL is everywhere. If you're talking about business, you will see SQL everywhere. Do you need to, there are courses available. There are short courses available. There are boot camps available that will teach you some part of that. Yeah, that would be great. That's all you need. SQL is important. Being able to learn how to sort of model data. If you're a data scientist, some basic skills, being able to understand when to apply a regression versus when to apply a classification algorithm. Those are important skills you would be expected to know as a data scientist. But are you going to be expected to know the ins and outs of a deep learning model? Probably not. But you might be expected to know how to use them. So I think there is no excuse for people to not know how to use some of the tools, but all of those tools are open source, and good implementations are available here and there, and a lot of tutorials are available here and there. The only thing I want you to not do is, if you see a tutorial, you think you've mastered it. That's not how it works, right? It may help you solve a very small problem. Try to see what's going on. And finally, what should you really be good at? In my view, if you're using a lot of open source tools, these days we all use open source tools, learning how to find the documentation and actually understanding documentation is a really important skill. Because not all the problems you're going to be solved, you have an answer in chat GPT or you have an answer somewhere else. You will be hopefully be solving newer problems. So you will have to apply your understanding. For that, being able to learn how to read somebody else's code, open source code, understand kind of what's going on, but also learning to read documentation and understanding what's the expectation is a great thing. I think those would be great. And then I think that's the general sort of framework in which I would operate.
थैंक यू जहांगीर. सो एक चीज बार बार लोग पूछ रहे हैं कि हम कहाँ अप्लाई करें ग्रेजुएट एडमिशंस में. सो लुक आई विल जस्ट आंसर यू. US news ranking होती है. Just look at top 100 universities in the US. Don't look at top 3 universities in the US, MIT, Princeton. So you can apply in one of those universities, what we call Ivy League sort of universities. But I would suggest कि second year, third year, it is very, आप US में किसी भी graduate admission degree में चले जाएंगे, and then there are equal chances for everyone कि wherever you want to get into. So then the skills matter more than the brand actually. So it's important. Zare quality of education differ a lot, but still, you will find people in a state university and they are working at MIT and Google and everywhere. So that doesn't matter. But just being in the US, you can just see the top 100 universities. Top 10 में से किसी एक में apply कर ले अपना शौक पूरा करने के लिए, if you really want to, but rest of the time go for other entities. और सब लोगों को जो शौक होता है कि where should we apply, लोग कहते हैं हार्वर्ड और MIT प्रिंसटन से नीचे नहीं अप्लाई करना. And I ask everyone, just give GRE exam and this will tell you where you stand. Doesn't mean GRE is everything, but it tells you something about yourself. So where you are, and the recruiters university जो हैं वो भी GRE score को, it's not everything but it is something and it is important thing. So दूसरा जहांगीर, इसमें बाकी कुछ questions मैं skip कर रहा हूँ. बहुत सारे लोग
क्वेश्चन मैं एड्रेस करना चाहता हूँ because it came up very quickly. This session has become about software engineering versus AI ML. So I actually have very strong feelings about this. There is no AI ML engineer in the world who is not also a software engineer. And if you find those, run away from them. That is absolutely complete nonsense, right? You cannot. This is a field of computer science. If you can't also become an engineer, the expectations of an engineer, of a computer engineer, how we do software engineering, then what are you doing in the AI ML field? Yes, you can be a theoretician. This session is not about how you become a theoretician, right? And I don't think any of you or any of me or others are really, that would be a very different session. If you were joining this expecting to know how to become a better theoretician, then obviously you joined the wrong session. But if you expect that we should not talk about software engineering, this is hopefully the one takeaway that you have from all of this is, go back to the basics. There is no replacement for the basics. AI, ML today, you might call it something else like in 10 years from now. That's not the important part. The important part is the fundamentals. If your fundamentals are weak, unfortunately, there is no hope. And now I'm saying no hope doesn't mean you will not have a job. There are lots of jobs in the world economy, in the US economy, Pakistan economy, here and there. If you want to sort of operate in the tier A, then it is a prerequisite that you will know the basics inside out. And what is the basic of a lot of this is at the end of the day, engineering. thinking like an engineer, solving like an engineer, in particular software engineering. So and learning how to code is a fundamental part of that, right? That's not something that we anyway. So you know the rest of it.
So, guys,
And
I'd just like to build on what Jahangir is saying. Look, there is something that जो जहांगीर कह रहे हैं कि software engineering is important, and it doesn't mean you need to have a degree in software engineering. I know people who are civil engineers and they are working at NVIDIA as software engineers.
Yep.
There are people, in Facebook who used to be dentists in their previous life and now they are software engineers. So it means you need to train yourself, you need to teach yourself. And without that, understanding the fundamentals of software engineering, then AI engineering can't happen. So doesn't mean आपकी degree पहले क्या है. Mathematicians अगर आप देखेंगे दुनिया में तो so many mathematicians you'll find they are very good at coding actually. But they did not learn coding per se in their university maybe, but they taught themselves like Jahangir जैसे कह रहे हैं. So that should not be a limitations to you, if you have not done a software engineering. So I just thought to clarify one point. Second जो है वो जो है जहांगीर इसमें काफी सारे questions आ रहे थे about AI in healthcare as a software engineer. If someone wants to enter into this field and as an AI engineer, then how should they approach it? बाकी जो बहुत सारे questions हैं, I'm ignoring them. Many of these questions you can ask ChatGPT or गूगल पे जाके ज्यादा अच्छे आंसर्स मिल जाएंगे. जी जहांगीर.
Sorry, well, healthcare and look, I'm not a healthcare expert, but healthcare and tech have always, in the last maybe last 20 years or so, big application for whatever is happening in tech. Always seems to also focus on healthcare. Healthcare is a big domain because regulation बहुत ज़्यादा है. The bar for making higher quality things is much higher in healthcare, because just imagine you get the wrong diagnosis of an individual and unfortunately they die. That is a lot more impactful, sadly, than just having a bug in your code that brings down one cluster. That's so it's a matter of life and death as well, which is why a lot of effort has gone in, which is why a lot of failure has happened in healthcare as well. And so there's a lot of room, a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity outside, definitely outside the US. US healthcare in general is very highly regulated and a very slow-moving sort of industry. Outside the US, there's a lot of opportunity. And so certainly, I think not just AI, in general, good engineering solutions can certainly help. Now, are we going to start replacing doctors? I don't think we should try that. I don't think there's any point in doing that. But can we build tools that help doctors? So some of you have probably heard of Overjet. This is a company run by one of my friends who's based here, also Pakistani, Varda Inam, from GK graduate as well. She's made a dental AI startup and it is doing amazing. And essentially what are they doing at its core? They're using advanced machine learning, call it AI if you want to, techniques to essentially make X-rays for dental X-rays more readable, more accessible, and help doctors diagnose things better. And suddenly, it is currently nearing $1 billion valuation. It's already valued at $500 million in terms of its valuation. She's a good friend. She was also a PhD at MIT and an undergrad from GK. And so, there is no shortage of really good problems, but try to solve the problem. And so she identified that there is a gap there, which had nothing to do with AI. It was just the fact that because of poor quality of images, doctors were finding it harder to diagnose what the actual problem was. So you can help with the imaging part of the process. And then through that, you can also make recommendations and things like that the doctors can then sort of use. And that's a great idea, right? It's a smart use of the tools, modern tools, to solve a problem that has been existing for a while. So think about those things. I think in any domain, whether it's healthcare, whether it's construction, whether it's finance and other things. Finance is interesting because a lot of tech has been in working with finance for a very long time, right? As you would imagine. But education is another domain, right? How do you help people learn better? AI and some of these things are certainly exposing some of those things, and you will see, and you are seeing a lot of activity in that domain as well, right? How do you find more useful information faster is a big theme. But then, does it apply to everything? No. Does it apply to maybe the problems that you see around you? Absolutely. If you want to get noticed anywhere in the world these days, whether you're in Pakistan or whether you are in the US, solve a real problem and you will immediately see that you will not be able to hide it, even if you wanted to, because people want solutions. And so the advantage for you all is not even 20 years ago, this was not true 20 years ago. Now it is certainly true that you don't need to be sitting here or there or anywhere in particular to actually have an idea, execute it, try to solve a real problem, and then get noticed everywhere in the world. So I think that is the important thing. Learn the skill, think about the problem, think about the solutions, and then apply the tools. And I think you will find that if you have something that works, it doesn't matter where you are sitting, you will find traction for it. Funding ka dekh lein aap aajkal, Pakistan mein so many companies and ideas are getting funded from people who are based here or elsewhere in the world. That is not restricted anymore. This was not true 20, 25 years ago even. And so it's certainly more and more true now. So there's, this desire to think that you might want to be in the US should even be less now, because, you don't need, if you're an entrepreneur, if you have an idea, if you want to have a career, you don't have to be in any particular place. Now there are so many tools at our disposal. And I'll finish also by saying that you already know this. We tend to, for companies here, hire a lot of remote employees, and sometimes we'll have like engineering offices. I'll give you an example. The same Varda who talked about Overjet, they have an engineering office now in Lahore. She was recently telling me, initially they had 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 engineers, but now they have an office there as well. Is because there are a lot of Pakistani entrepreneurs and technologists who are also interested in tapping into the talent that you all have. And so slowly things are going to change more and more in that direction as well. So if you can't bring people to here, you can certainly go where the people are as well. And so I think there is a lot of hope. But who are the people who get hired for some of those things? And then you get back to the same set of slides and the same talking points that I said earlier, which is learn the skills, upskill all the time. You should know what the technology trends are. You should know how to solve problems. You should know how to code. You should know how to reason about code. If you are a data scientist or an AI ML person, you should know about your algorithms, what they're good for, what they're not good for, and have practical examples to talk about, not just theoretical answers, right? And then I think you'll be fine. That's my take.
जी थैंक यू जहांगीर डू यू हैव अ मिनट आई जस्ट वांट लाइक टू कि अगर आप जैसे कह रहे हैं कि अपस्किल करें अपने आप को so if you have to learn something, if you have to upskill yourself, where you go, what platform you focus, where you read blogs, podcasts.
That's
so
a
maybe
really
that will be interested if you can tell, so we can conclude with that.
Very, very good question. I think that is really good. Practically, what do I do if I'm looking for something? So, of course, search is the number one thing. Whether you use Google or Perplexity or you use ChatGPT, doesn't really matter. They all try to basically get you the answer, and usually, that they're good enough. There are lots of podcasts that people produce. I think podcast has become a very fast-growing industry. Most of the podcasts are pretty junk, as I'm sure you all know. Some of them are usually good, but I think it takes a little while. What are you interested in? Are they consistently, addressing the questions that you had on your mind? In terms of the blogs and in terms of some of the writings and whatnot, there are lots of sources. If you want to start off with something very basic, the first step is usually just knowing what are the technology trends that are around us. And you don't even need a very sort of focused forecast for that. Because I'm based in the US, my answer will be very US centric. But Wall Street Journal, for instance, has a technology blog on YouTube. I think they just have like 5-minute, 6-minute, 8-minute videos that typically talk about like one topic at a time. And I encourage you to check those things out, not just Wall Street Journal, but lots of other sources have that information. LinkedIn pay, a lot of people are sort of posting links to some of those things. The reason I think those are important is not because you're suddenly going to learn a concept. It will give you ideas for what you want to learn better, because some once in a while something will interest you and you'll dive deeper into it yourself, by either taking an online course. Some people asked about this too. Look, I'll be frank. If you're asking me how do we get access to MIT and Stanford free resources, then I think you have a more basic thing to address, which is how do you search? And so we all know how to search. I'm not going to teach you how to search, right? That's the most common thing these days. Type it in Google and see what comes up, right? So I think there is some of that. There are courses available which are on these free platforms. YouTube is a great resource, lots of education material there. But then if you now identify, let's say you are somebody who didn't, through your education journey, did not find that either you learned programming the way you wanted to, or maybe it's outdated, or you don't think you paid attention, you now feel that that is relevant. What can you do? There are lots of sort of these, yes, you don't have to think of just the MIT, Stanford resources. Khan Academy is a great resource. But now, remember, all of those resources are great. But sometimes when you identify a skill, let's say programming, let's say data science, you do need sometimes a little bit of help, a guided help, somebody who can actually guide you through the process and answer your questions. This is how we learn, right? Just consuming one-way video content is usually, gets you 70% of the way there, but that 30% is maybe still remaining. That's where things like what Naveed Saab and Fiza do, boot camps, some of those things. I'm not recommending that you sign up for a boot camp for everything. You identify what you need, and get there, not as a first step. Hopefully identify by first doing a little bit of your homework, watch some videos, watch some lectures online, YouTube, Google the concepts, Google the field, and hopefully that will get you the right language. And if you're still interested and want to dive deeper with some guided help, boot camps are excellent for that, because what they'll do is they'll allow you an ability to ask questions. Chat GPTs can answer questions, but it's not the same as working through maybe a human person on the other end who really can help unlock some of the misunderstandings or some of the conceptual details. So that's how I do it. I just told you that I signed up for a Google 5-day intensive AI sort of boot camp thing, and it was great. I do that too. Is part of my current job. Also, I work a lot on time series data. And so we have some public courses that we make available as well, because there is a lot of need. We talk to our customers, we talk to other people, and they know all the resources are there. But sometimes when you've made up your mind that this is what you want to know deeper, you sometimes want a more dedicated set of resources. So I'm not just saying this for the sake of saying it. Even when we offer courses here, we offer sort of paid versions of those courses. What is the paid part? The paid part is access to the sort of people who can come on and answer your questions live, which is usually a pretty core skill, right? And so if you are going through a boot camp, or if you're going through a learning program where you have that ability, I think if you're interested in that domain, certainly do those things. But there's no excuse for you to not know what's going on in your domain. If technology is your domain, you should know what's going on. What are the current trends? Generally, where are things headed? Not because you want to think that there is going to be an immediate job on the other end of it, but I think it's an expectation of you. Think about the fact that if you are in your family or your family circles, you are the person who is the engineer, who has these fancy new tools at your disposal. They're going to look for you to answer what's going on. I'll give you an example. Abhi ek YouTube pe, I'm sure you can check this video. There's a comedian called Jimmy Kimmel. Some of you might know. Uska ek show hota hai, roz hota hai US mein. What I saw, interestingly, I don't watch the show, but what I saw was that he played a prank on his aunt. His aunt is like very old, has no idea that ab driverless gaadiyan bhi hoti hai, right? And so brought his aunt, tricked her into sitting in the car, and then just closed the door, and the car started driving. And they were recording her reactions, and she was absolutely scared to death. कि ये गाड़ी खुद से कैसे चल रही है, क्या हो गया, aliens ने take over कर लिया, Russians ने control कर लिया, क्या हो गया, steering wheel मुड़ रहा है, but there's no human being, and those things. It was hilarious. to watch. But again, your parents are in that generation. My parents are in that generation. There's a lot of fraud that happens. There is a lot of things that happen. You are the people who everybody is relying on to know कि क्या सच है क्या नहीं है सच. आज की दुनिया में, obviously I'm philosophizing a little bit, आज की दुनिया में misinformation इतनी ज्यादा है कि we need people like you who understand how these things work to know, should I worry about this, should I not worry about this. How do you tell कि कहाँ टेक्नोलॉजी आपके साथ झूठ बोल रही है और कहाँ वो आपकी असिस्टेंट है. So I think that is very important. Learn, read, and my hope is that whether there is a job on the other end or not, being ready is also knowing. Work on yourself. You need to know. You should always target to be that person who you don't have to say it, but you should know it. And if you target that sort of a bar, I think you will make sure that you are always learning, relearning on top of things and concepts. I know this sounds empty, but that's what I do too. The thing that keeps me awake is, what if 2 years from now, everything I know, nobody is interested in that at all? It won't happen, but that's a fear. What that fear does is it makes me continually trying to read more, to continually try to sort of figure out, oh, there is something new that I would like to know deeper and deeper. And then you figure out ways how to go deeper. But at the very minimum, if you don't even know, how are you going to decide how to go deeper? So use all the tools at your disposal, and certainly then focus on some assisted programs when you realize that this is where you want to make your career. And career is an investment, and so don't be afraid of making an investment in your career. So that's what I would say. I know maybe this was too generic an answer.
Thank you so much, Jahangir. Dr. Naveed left because of his internet problems. So I guess we took a lot of questions, and I think generally सबके की तरह के सवाल थे. So everyone, if you have any other question, there are email is on the chat. I will request Team Atom Camp to post about the boot camps that we offer, as well as the email address where everyone can answer the queries. Please, we are not taking any questions through mic. If you have any question, please leave us an email and we will ask Jahangir to answer them. Thank you so much, Jahangir, for your time.
Thank
And
you.
we will conclude this. Thank you. Khudafis.